He had the golden touch. Everything he conquered turned to treasure. But there was one thing this king couldn't control, and it would cost him his throne, his mind, and 7 years of his life. This is the story of Nebuchadnezzar, the king who became a beast and learned the hard way that heaven rules.
Over 2,600 years ago, in the ancient city of Babylon, there lived the most powerful king the world had ever known. His name was Nebuchadnezzar, and his empire stretched across the known world like a mighty shadow. His armies were unstoppable, and his city shone with gold, tall walls, and towers that touched the sky. His wealth was beyond measure, and his pride, well, that was about to become his greatest enemy. In the year 605 BC, Nebuchadnezzar set his eyes on the small kingdom of Judah. The people there had turned away from God, and the Lord allowed Babylon to conquer them. So Nebuchadnezzar's armies marched toward the city of Jerusalem. The people of Judah watched in terror as the Babylonian soldiers surrounded their walls. Jerusalem, the holy city of God's chosen people, was under siege. King Jehoiakim of Judah tried to resist, but it was no use. Nebuchadnezzar's forces were too strong. The Babylonian king crashed through Jerusalem's gates like a storm. He didn't just take the city, he took everything that made it special. His soldiers marched into the temple of God and carried away the sacred vessels, the golden cups and bowls used in worship. These treasures were loaded onto carts and taken back to Babylon, where Nebuchadnezzar placed them in the temple of his own God, as if to say, "My God is stronger than yours." But Nebuchadnezzar didn't stop with gold and silver. He had a different kind of treasure in mind. He ordered his chief official, Ashpenaz, to search through Jerusalem's noble families and find the very best young men, teenagers, who were smart, handsome, strong, and educated. These young men would be taken from their homes, brought to Babylon, and trained to serve in the king's palace. Among these captives were 4 young men whose lives were about to change forever. Their Hebrew names were Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. But in Babylon, they were given new names, names that honored Babylonian gods. Daniel became Belteshazzar, Hananiah became Shadrach, Mishael became Meshach, and Azariah became Abednego. The king wanted to erase their Jewish identity. He wanted these young men to forget their God and become loyal servants of his empire. For 3 years, they would study the language and literature of Babylon. They would learn the ways of the Chaldeans. They would eat the king's rich food and drink his wine. But Daniel refused to defile himself with the royal food and wine. It wasn't about the food itself. It was about staying faithful to God's commands no matter what. Daniel approached Ashpenaz respectfully and asked for permission to eat only vegetables and drink only water. Ashpenaz was worried. "If you look weak and unhealthy compared to the other young men, the king will have my head," he said. Daniel proposed a test. "Try it for 10 days, he suggested. "Give us vegetables and water and see how we look compared to the others." Ashpenaz agreed, and after 10 days, Daniel and his 3 friends looked healthier and stronger than all the young men who ate the king's food. God was blessing their faithfulness. At the end of their 3 years of training, all the young men were brought before King Nebuchadnezzar. He spoke with each one, testing their knowledge and wisdom. but none of them could compare to Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, and Azariah. These 4 Jewish captives were given positions in the royal court, right in the heart of the Babylonian Empire. But their greatest challenges were still ahead.
In the 2nd year of his reign, something strange happened to Nebuchadnezzar. He began having nightmares, terrible dreams that shook him awake in the middle of the night, his heart pounding, sweat dripping from his forehead. He knew these dreams meant something important, but he couldn't remember what he had dreamed. The king summoned every wise man in Babylon, the magicians, the enchanters, the sorcerers, and the astrologers. They hurried into the throne room and bowed before him. "I've had a dream that troubles me deeply," Nebuchadnezzar announced. "I need to know what it means." The wise men responded with confidence. "O king, live forever. Tell us the dream and we will interpret it." But Nebuchadnezzar had a different plan. His eyes narrowed as he looked at them. "No," he said coldly, "you tell me the dream. If you're really as wise as you claim, you should be able to tell me both the dream and its meaning. If you can do this, I'll reward you with gifts and honors. But if you can't," he paused, letting the threat hang in the air, "I'll have you cut into pieces and your houses turned into piles of rubble." The wise men were horrified. "No one on earth can do what the king asks," they protested. "What you're asking is impossible." Nebuchadnezzar's face turned red with rage. "Then you're all useless," he roared. "Execute them! Execute every wise man in Babylon!" The decree went out immediately. Soldiers began rounding up all the wise men in the kingdom, including Daniel and his 3 friends. When the commander of the guard came to arrest them, Daniel asked calmly, "Why is the king's decree so urgent?" After hearing the explanation, Daniel went directly to the king and asked for time. "Give me a little time," he said, "and I will tell the king the interpretation." That night, Daniel gathered with Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. They prayed together, asking God to reveal the mystery. And during the night, God showed Daniel everything, the dream and its meaning. The next morning, Daniel was brought before the king. Nebuchadnezzar leaned forward on his throne. "Are you able to tell me what I dreamed and what it means?" he asked. Daniel didn't claim the credit for himself. "No wise man, enchanter, magician, or diviner can explain this mystery to the king," he said honestly. "But there is a God in heaven who reveals mysteries. He has shown me your dream." Then Daniel described exactly what Nebuchadnezzar had seen in his sleep. "Your Majesty, you saw a huge, dazzling statue standing before you. Its appearance was terrifying. The head of the statue was made of pure gold. Its chest and arms were silver. Its belly and thighs were bronze. Its legs were iron, and its feet were partly iron and partly clay." Nebuchadnezzar's eyes widened. This was exactly what he had dreamed. Daniel continued, "As you watched, a rock was cut out, but not by human hands. It struck the statue on its feet of iron and clay and smashed them. Then the whole statue, the iron, clay, bronze, silver, and gold, was broken to pieces and became like dust in the wind. But the rock that struck the statue became a huge mountain that filled the whole earth. Now let me tell you what it means. Your Majesty, you are the King of Kings. The God of heaven has given you power, strength, and glory. You are the head of gold. After you, another kingdom will rise, inferior to yours, that's the silver. Then a third kingdom of bronze will rule over the whole earth. Finally, there will be a fourth kingdom, strong as iron, that will crush and break everything. But here's the most important part. The feet and toes, partly of clay and partly of iron, represent a divided kingdom. It will be strong in some ways and weak in others. In the time of those kings, the God of heaven will set up a kingdom that will never be destroyed. It will crush all those other kingdoms and bring them to an end, but it will itself endure forever. That's the meaning of the rock cut out of the mountain by no human hand. Silence filled the throne room. Then, to everyone's shock, King Nebuchadnezzar stood up from his throne and fell down before Daniel. He ordered his servants to present offerings and incense to Daniel. "Surely your God is the God of gods and the Lord of kings and a revealer of mysteries, since you were able to reveal this mystery." The king loaded Daniel with gifts and made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief over all the wise men. Daniel also asked that Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego be appointed as administrators over the province. The king granted this request. You would think this experience would change Nebuchadnezzar forever, but pride has a way of creeping back into the human heart.
Sometime later, Nebuchadnezzar decided to build a golden statue. It was massive, 90 feet tall and 9 feet wide, and he had it set up on the plain of Dura in Babylon. Then he summoned all the important officials in his kingdom for a dedication ceremony. When everyone was gathered, a herald shouted out the king's command. "People of all nations and languages, when you hear the sound of the musical instruments, the horn, flute, zither, lyre, harp, pipes, and all kinds of music, you must fall down and worship the golden image that King Nebuchadnezzar has set up. Whoever doesn't fall down and worship will immediately be thrown into a blazing furnace." So when the music played, everyone fell down and worshipped the statue. Everyone, that is, except 3 young men. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego stood tall while thousands of people around them bowed low. Some of the Babylonian officials noticed this and immediately went to the king to report them. "O king, live forever," they said with fake concern. "You gave a decree that everyone must worship the golden image when they hear the music or be thrown into the furnace. But there are some Jews, Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, whom you've appointed over Babylon, and they're ignoring your command. They don't serve your gods or worship your golden image." Nebuchadnezzar was furious. His face turned dark with rage as he summoned the 3 friends. "Is it true?" he demanded. "Don't you serve my gods or worship the image I set up? I'll give you one more chance. When you hear the music, if you fall down and worship, very good. But if you don't worship it, you'll be thrown immediately into the blazing furnace. Then what God will be able to rescue you from my hands?" The 3 young men looked at each other, then faced the king with calm courage. "King Nebuchadnezzar," Shadrach said, "we don't need to defend ourselves before you in this matter." Meshach continued, "If we're thrown into the blazing furnace, the God we serve is able to deliver us from it, and he will deliver us from your majesty's hand. But even if he doesn't, we want you to know, your majesty, that we will not serve your gods or worship the image of gold you have set up."
What happens next? Let's discover it together. If you're enjoying this story, please tap the like and subscribe buttons so you never miss more biblical stories like this.
Nebuchadnezzar's anger knew no bounds. His face became twisted with rage, and he ordered the furnace to be heated 7 times hotter than usual, so hot that the flames were leaping out of the opening. He commanded some of his strongest soldiers to tie up Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego and throw them into the fire. The soldiers bound them tightly with ropes, still wearing their robes, trousers, turbans, and other clothes. They dragged them toward the furnace.
The heat was so intense that the flames killed the soldiers who threw them in. Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego tumbled into the roaring fire, tightly bound. But then, something impossible happened. Nebuchadnezzar suddenly jumped to his feet, his eyes wide with shock. "Didn't we tie up 3 men and throw them into the fire?" he asked his advisors. "Certainly, Your Majesty," they replied. "Look," the king shouted, pointing at the furnace. "I see 4 men walking around in the fire, unbound and unharmed, and the 4th one looks like a son of the gods." Nebuchadnezzar approached the opening of the furnace, shielding his face from the heat. "Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, servants of the Most High God, come out," he called. The 3 friends walked out of the fire. All the officials crowded around them, staring in amazement. Not a hair on their heads was singed. Their robes weren't scorched. They didn't even smell like smoke. It was as if the fire had no power over them at all. Nebuchadnezzar's voice trembled as he spoke. "Praise be to the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, who has sent his angel and rescued his servants. They trusted in him and were willing to give up their lives rather than serve or worship any god except their own God." He made another decree. "People of any nation or language who say anything against the God of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego will be cut into pieces and their houses turned into piles of rubble, for no other God can save in this way." Once again, Nebuchadnezzar witnessed God's power. Once again, he promoted the 3 friends. And once again, you would think he had learned his lesson about pride, but he hadn't.
Years passed. Nebuchadnezzar's kingdom continued to grow. His palace became more magnificent, his wealth increased, and slowly, gradually, his pride returned, stronger than ever. One night, the king had another dream. This time, he remembered every detail, but it filled him with terror. He called all the wise men of Babylon to interpret it, but none of them could. Finally, he summoned Daniel. "Belteshazzar," the king said, using Daniel's Babylonian name, "I know that the spirit of the holy gods is in you, and no mystery is too difficult for you. Here is my dream. Interpret it for me." Then Nebuchadnezzar described what he had seen. "I saw a tree in the middle of the land. It grew enormous and strong, reaching up to the sky, visible to the ends of the earth. Its leaves were beautiful, and it had abundant fruit, providing food for all. Wild animals found shelter under it, and birds lived in its branches. Every creature was fed from this tree. Then I saw a messenger, a holy one, coming down from heaven. He called out in a loud voice, 'Cut down the tree and trim off its branches, strip off its leaves and scatter its fruit. Let the animals flee from under it and the birds from its branches. But leave the stump with its roots in the ground, bound with iron and bronze, in the grass of the field. Let him be drenched with the dew of heaven, and let him live with the animals among the plants of the earth. Let his mind be changed from that of a man and given the mind of an animal, till 7 times pass by for him." When Nebuchadnezzar finished, Daniel sat in silence for a long time, clearly troubled by what he had heard. The king could see the distress on his face. "Don't let the dream or its meaning alarm you," Nebuchadnezzar said, trying to comfort him. Daniel finally spoke, his voice filled with sadness.
My lord, if only the dream applied to your enemies and its meaning to your adversaries. The tree you saw, that grew large and strong, with its top touching the sky, visible to the whole earth, that tree is you, your majesty. You have become great and strong. Your greatness has grown until it reaches the sky, and your dominion extends to distant parts of the earth. But the command to cut down the tree and destroy it while leaving the stump, Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. This is the interpretation, your majesty. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like cattle and be drenched with the dew of heaven. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. However, the command to leave the stump means that your kingdom will be restored to you when you acknowledge that heaven rules. Then Daniel gave the king urgent advice. Therefore, your majesty, please accept my advice. Renounce your sins by doing what is right, and your wickedness by being kind to the oppressed. Perhaps then your prosperity will continue.
12 months passed. For a whole year, nothing happened. Perhaps Nebuchadnezzar thought he had escaped the prophecy. Perhaps he forgot about the dream altogether. One day, the king was walking on the roof of his royal palace in Babylon, looking out over the city. The hanging gardens stretched before him in terraced glory. The massive walls of the city gleamed in the sunlight. The Ishtar Gate sparkled with brilliant blue tiles. Everywhere he looked, he saw monuments to his power and achievement. Pride swelled in his chest. He spoke aloud, his voice filled with self-satisfaction. Is not this the great Babylon I have built as the royal residence, by my mighty power and for the glory of my majesty? The words were still on his lips when a voice came from heaven. This is what is decreed for you, King Nebuchadnezzar. Your royal authority has been taken from you. You will be driven away from people and will live with the wild animals. You will eat grass like the ox. 7 times will pass by for you until you acknowledge that the Most High is sovereign over all kingdoms on earth and gives them to anyone he wishes. Immediately, at that very moment, the prophecy was fulfilled. Nebuchadnezzar's mind snapped. His sanity was torn away like a piece of cloth ripped from his body. He dropped to his hands and knees, and a terrible transformation began. The mighty king of Babylon was driven away from his palace. He wandered into the fields like a wild animal. He ate grass like an ox, his face pressed to the ground, chewing on vegetation. The dew of heaven soaked his body every night. His hair grew long and matted, becoming like eagle's feathers. His nails grew long and curved like the claws of a bird. For 7 years, the most powerful man in the world lived as a beast. The king who had conquered nations couldn't even control his own mind. The ruler who had built magnificent palaces slept under the stars like an animal. The man who had eaten from golden plates grazed on grass. His officials ran the kingdom in his absence, probably telling people that the king was ill or in seclusion. But Nebuchadnezzar was out in the fields, lost in madness, barely aware of who he had once been. But God's purpose in all of this wasn't just punishment, it was transformation. Sometimes the only way to cure pride is to reduce us to nothing, to strip away everything we think makes us important, until all that's left is the truth.
We are utterly dependent on God for everything. 7 times passed, 7 long years, and then at the end of that period, something changed. Nebuchadnezzar, in his animal-like state, raised his eyes toward heaven. It was a small movement, but it meant everything. For 7 years, his eyes had been fixed on the ground, on the grass, on the earth. But now, for the first time in years, he looked up. He looked toward God. And in that moment, his sanity returned. His mind cleared like fog lifting from a morning field. He could think again. He could remember who he was. And more importantly, he understood something he had never truly grasped before. God alone deserves the glory. Nebuchadnezzar's own words describe what happened next. I, Nebuchadnezzar, raised my eyes toward heaven, and my sanity was restored. Then I praised the Most High. I honored and glorified Him who lives forever. His dominion is an eternal dominion. His kingdom endures from generation to generation. All the peoples of the earth are regarded as nothing. He does as He pleases with the powers of heaven and the peoples of the earth. No one can hold back His hand or say to Him, "What have you done?" At the same time that His sanity returned, His honor and splendor were restored. His advisors and nobles sought Him out, and He was restored to His throne. He became even greater than before. But this time, Nebuchadnezzar was different. This time, he had learned the lesson that God had been trying to teach him all along. He concluded his own account of these events with these words, "Now I, Nebuchadnezzar, praise and exalt and glorify the King of heaven, because everything He does is right, and all His ways are just. And those who walk in pride, He is able to humble."
Nebuchadnezzar's story is really our story too. We all face the same temptation, to take credit for what God has done, to build our own kingdoms and forget the King of heaven. But God loves us too much to leave us in that illusion. Sometimes He humbles us, not to destroy, but to heal. Because pride always ends in ruin, and humility is the only path to true greatness. Nebuchadnezzar went from a conquering king to a beast in the field, then to a humbled man who finally understood real wisdom. His journey reminds us that no matter how powerful or successful we become, we must never forget where it all comes from. God can lift us up and He can bring us down, but when He does, it's always to save us from ourselves. The king who became a beast became a king again, this time one who finally knew the difference between human pride and divine authority.
Thanks for watching this story of Nebuchadnezzar. If this video inspired you or taught you something new, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to our channel for more amazing Bible stories that bring Scripture to life. Hit that notification bell so you never miss an upload. Share this with someone who needs to hear about the power of humility and God's sovereignty. What's your biggest takeaway from Nebuchadnezzar's story? Drop a comment below. I'd love to hear from you. Until next time, remember, pride comes before a fall, but humility leads to restoration. God bless you.